Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios, and if you've not seen any of the videos that I've done before, I'm a music producer from England. So today we're going to be talking about the cabinets that we've just released with two notes through the Torpedo hardware and the Wall of Sound software. So we've produced a pack mostly, almost entirely based around Zilla cabinets, namely the Fat Baby, the Fat Boy, and a 4x12 and a Studio Pro, all with different speakers. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a mix that I've been doing for a song by a band called Banana Ranch. So let's have a look. Let's flick over to this. So this song is called Contradiction. Now, as you can see, there's tons of stuff going on here. I've frozen a lot of the tracks just so that my laptop that I'm using can cope with playback and streaming all at the same time. So I've worked with this band before, and this time they didn't have the budget to do a full studio recording, and I didn't have the available time to do a full studio recording and reamping session and all that kind of stuff. So what we did is we worked out a deal where they've recorded a lot of this at home. They've come into the studio to record the vocals and trumpets and saxophones and things. And I've been mixing in any available time that I've had using my laptop and checking on speakers, which has meant that I've not been able to record guitar amps for this particular album. So I've been using virtual amps, and for the cabinets I've been using Two Notes Wall of Sound. Let's bring that up for you right now. So this has absolutely saved my skin in terms of getting this album mixed. I should have this out within the next couple of weeks. This song, let's just play a little clip. This is called Contradiction. C-O-N-T-R-A-D-I-C-T-I-O-N, yes you are. Two, three, four. Sweet contradiction of the human race. Okay, so when it gets to the complicated bit, there's a lot going on. For example, so there's a lot to talk about here because there are actually 14 distinct guitar channels, which is a lot to go through. But thanks to the Two Notes Wall of Sound software and using my own cabinets, which I know fairly well, and I will try and explain some of the best ones to you today, I managed to breeze through most of this mix in a matter of hours. Checked it on monitors, of course, let's not preclude that. So I made a few mix tweaks in the studio based on what I could hear in a proper monitoring environment, but 95–99% of the work was done on my laptop with the cans. I mean, yes, like I say, it needed a little checking, but that's not to say that I had to do the entire thing in the studio. Anyway, moving back on to what we have here, let's look at a clean tone. So the reason that there are 14 guitars is there are actually 7 distinct guitar parts, and they've all been doubled left and right, which is quite common. In fact, it's something that I very much recommend guitarists to do for a lot of parts, unless it's something like a melodic solo. Unless, hey, maybe Randy Rhoads used to, left and right his solos as well, but he was really something else. So it takes them out of the center image. One thing that we can do with most of the plugins that I use, as you can see today, I am using Reaper. Reaper is my DAW of choice, but if you use Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, any major DAW, Two Notes will work. Two Notes Wall of Sound will work perfectly for you. And that's Windows and Mac. It's fairly platform agnostic. If you have a computer and want to make music, unless you're a Linux enthusiast, and even then probably, there's a very, very good chance you can use the Two Notes Torpedo Wall of Sound. So let's just focus on this clean channel for a second, because this section is kind of the verse. There are two guitars, so let's look at one of them. So it's quite kind of big and round sounding as a clean tone, but it's not muffly. So what I've done, the amps that I like to use if I'm going virtual are thermionic. So in this case, I've used their version of a Blackface Fender Twin reverb. So even though the gain on this is quite high, for a Fender Twin, that's not unusual. That's still got no gain, at quote unquote, as far as we can hear. Then we've got wall of sound. So before I talk about this in depth, let's just show you the rest of the signal chain here. So I've got Soundtoys Echo Boy, which is giving us that delay, which is not too different from a guitarist using a delay pedal. And then I'm using Slate Digital's Virtual Mix Rack, and the only thing in there is one of their new Virtual Tube Collection, which is just adding a little nice something. If I turn that on and off, it's hardly doing anything. That's kind of a mixing engineer's thing that just helps to clear the mix up a little when there's 14 guitars going. So back to the task in hand. The thing we really want to talk about is this. This is Two Notes Wall of Sound, Torpedo Wall of Sound. Let's not get too deep into talking about what Wall of Sound can do, because I've previously done a tutorial video on how to use Wall of Sound and all the separate parts of it. So let's just talk about my cabs today. So in this instance, on this clean cab, I've used what's quite possibly my favourite cab combination for tightness and warmth, which is to say I've used the Fat Baby by Zilla 112, which is called the Big Baby Red. So it's inspired by the Zilla cab. We're not actually selling Zilla cabs, and it's got a Celestion Redback 150 watt speaker in it. It's got quite a big round sound, as you can hear here. And one thing that I do a lot is when you come into this, the distance and center are on 0% by default, which means that the microphone's dead center and right in the middle, right on the grill. So I like to pull it back off the grill a little and then pull it slightly away. And that just gives me a little bit more space, as it were. And the microphone that I've chosen here is the 101 ribbon, which is based on the Royer R101, which is very similar to the Royer R121, maybe with a little more mid-forward characteristic, which I personally quite like on guitars. Interesting thing there is I had to ask Two Notes to add this in as a microphone choice because it's something that I really wanted to use. So never been seen before on a Two Notes cab, the Royer 101 ribbon right there. And let's just have a look. So if you look closely at this this speaker right here, you'll see there's no grill cloth on it. The grill cloth has not been removed. This cabinet was made for me by Zilla, specifically as a custom order, and I asked Paul from Zilla if he would make it with no grill cloth. I mean, where the microphone is here is slightly misleading. That should be a little further in. I think that's a little bug in the Two Notes software, and that's going to get fixed. But when I'm working with recording guitar cabs, I like to have that clarity that you get from not having the grill cloth there. And also, I particularly like in the studio not having to get a torch out to really stare and find the best place on a speaker. I can just put the microphone where I want because I can see where it's supposed to go straight away, stick it on there, go in the control room, make sure I can listen and make sure it sounds right. But I pretty much know how it's going to sound because I'm 100% confident that I put the mic where I intended to. So that kind of thing, even when doing these kind of captures and capturing these cabinets to instill in the wall of sound, it's brought a certain clarity. Now let's move on to the next guitar, because this is using the same cabinet, but the microphone is different. So this you hear the attack there. If I just switch to the 101 ribbon here, you'll hear that it becomes quite thick. This is using Thermionics Friedman Brown Eye. on the Brown Eye channel, just to give it a little bit of character. If I play these two guitars together, with this one with the ribbon on, you'll hear it sounds a little kind of muddy and thick when together. So what I did is I first started off by picking a good old SM57 for this. And it wasn't quite doing it for me, so I picked one of my favourite alternate mics, which is the Audix i5. If you're finding in the studio that you need an alternate guitar tone that's just got a little bit more bite and presence, use an Audix i5 instead of an SM57. There's a tip. Because it just brings out... that attack. Now let's move on to this PreChorus. That should be called PreChorus, I think. Let's just rename it PreChorus. This guitar has a Thermionics version of an Electro Harmonix big muff in front of the amp, and it sounds big. Let's find Wall of Sound and show you what I've used, because I've used the same cabinet but with a different speaker, which is this. Now that does sound a little thin, and there's a reason for that. If I take the EQ and the exciter off, sounds big, but it's definitely a mixed decision where I've taken out quite a lot of the low end, boosted the top and put a bit of exciter on there. And I've picked the i5 and the Alnico Cream speaker in here. If I go back to the red back quickly, you'll hear... the Alnico Cream's just got a different character to it that's got a bit more of a push that cuts through a mix quite well, where the Redback's full and can really fill a mix out. This one, the Alnico, just cuts through, so if I unsolo this... you hear how it's quite aggressive and really cuts through without being piercing. But it also means that when we get to the actual chorus, there's room to grow because there's more, it doesn't completely dominate the mix. So if I just play
T-R-A-D-I-C-T-I-O-N, yes you are. Sweet contradiction.
The other thing is the bass. I'll just quickly play you the bass. The bass has a fuzz on it on this track. So to cut through that, we do need to use these quite aggressive cabinet sounds. Let's move on to the chorus. Now this is a classic jangly kind of rock sound using the Big Beast, which is my nickname for my custom Zilla 4x12. It's a standard size 4x12, but it's quite deep. And we've used a Sennheiser 421 mic on this. You can see the distance, I've really added some distance here. Because with the distance at 0, with the mic right up against the cab, it was just sounding a bit almost sandy and gritty in the mix. Those are words I would use to describe it, whereas this distance and a little bit off center just helps to stick it back in the mix a little. And over the top of that, there are two completely different feature guitars, which really is making the mix quite busy. So let's have a look at one called Big Delay. Right, so this one's using the Zilla Fat Boy, again miking up the Alnico Cream speaker. I did quite a lot of switching speakers round while we were doing these captures, so that we had so much variety. And this is a good old SM57 with my kind of vanilla, little 8 to 10% distance, 8 to 10% or 12% center. if I was to put a different mic on this, like say the Neumann KM184, which is a small diaphragm condenser mic, but I got the idea to use that from Nolly from Periphery, who uses that as a secondary mic with an SM57 quite a lot. One of the interesting things there is it sounds nicer on its own, but in the mix it can kind of get lost in this context. There we go, so all I did there to make that poke out of the mix is I picked the i5 and just pushed the volume a little, and there it is. Last but not least, there's another big delay, which I should probably call big delay 2. I was in such a rush making this mix that I didn't even properly name everything, which is bad of me, I know. And this one's a big, scratchy lead tone, which if we were to use one of the brighter sounding speakers like a Vintage 30 or the Alnico Cream, let's just try that now. That will sound quite harsh. Where the K100 here is a bit warmer, but it's got a distinct upper mid peak in it, which just helps it sit in the mix underneath these two guitars. That's an interesting thing about mixing, is that variety is so useful, and quite often I'll do this even when I have the studio available to me, because to get this amount of variety in a mix I would have to stop what I'm doing, either re-mic up the cabinet with new microphones or have another cabinet with other microphones ready, and that can just spoil your workflow. Doing this is such a great time saver. So one more mic, and that's just one called the ending guitar, which is just a fuzzy beast. So that big guitar there, just to solo it for a second, is a good old Marshall Plexi with a Fat Boy with a Vintage 30, which is one of the speakers everyone knows and loves. And that sounds great, and it can be that simple. That with 14 guitars going on, every one of them is using wall of sound, every one of them is using my cabs, and every one of them has its own place with its own microphone choice and its own cabinet choice, and it's all at my fingertips, which means that my time can be saved dramatically, despite the fact that I'm not using real cabs. They are real cabs, they just happen to have been captured to save time, to make things more efficient. If you're using one of the Torpedo boxes, you can use these live as well. There's the Torpedo Cab, there's the Torpedo Studio. So even with a real tube amp, if you're playing live and you're not really keen on deafening everybody on stage, then you can use these cabinets in these situations on a live perspective, and they're available now on the Two Notes store. So if you've not already gone to the Two Notes store, have a look. Wall of sound, you have to buy one cabinet and then it's yours to own. If you buy one of the Torpedo pieces of hardware, then you can buy these cabinets as well. So if you've been looking for that Zilla punch and articulation and clarity, it's all here, it's all available, and it's all there right now. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked this video. Hit the like button if you found this useful, and share and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios, and I'll see you in the next video.